welcome to the Thriving Marriage Podcast. My name is Marc Johnston. With me today is Sergio. Hey, Sergio, how are you doing today?
Doing well. And
Nice.
we are super excited today. We're going to be bringing in some interesting topics that we're going to be talking about. What do we have on the board for today, Marc?
Well, I thought I wanted to go over a little bit something that I've been seeing in a lot of the comments and a lot of what I've been hearing from clients. A big topic that I'm hearing and that keeps coming up is a topic of hope. And just about everyone wants to have some sort of idea about how much hope their situation has, and so I think that's one thing that's been really weighing on me for a little bit as I've been seeing that in the group.
Yeah, and there are some interesting cases about that, how people miscalculate hope. But before we get to that, let's go through some of the wins we had. We just recently are opening up now the cohort for new clients of December for the next 6 months. And we have like some super fresh off the oven wins, literally from like 7 hours ago and things like that. So let's go to a couple of them just to kind of bring in some positivity here for some of you struggling a bit more. We have here Stu, one of the recent clients. He's sharing in the clients community. He says, "Hey, Marc and I talked last week and we put together a plan to give my wife certain access that she was looking for." So effectively, he joined in a pretty tricky situation. And he had quite a big win because he was talking about very sensitive topics with his wife. When he came to us at the very beginning, his wife was, I believe, blocking him sometimes, right? Even blocking the text messages, that kind of thing. Do I remember correctly? Mm-hmm. So yeah, she was blocking him. He was super confused, right? Again, this is the type of emotional alcoholic behavior we see. And the win is that finally they're able to talk, right? Without her exploding, without her attacking him. So congratulations to you, Stu, on that win.
Congrats. Yeah, that was an interesting situation there where like there's a lot of fear about being open and being transparent with his wife, and that was the fear, exactly what you were just reading off there, that there's going to be a lot of attacks with that. And what I've found with a lot of clients is there's a lot of reluctance to go through the needed, difficult, heavy conversations that have been just kind of been held back a whole bunch. Somewhere along the way, they're like, oh, go ahead.
There is either reluctance or too much interest in having those conversations. It's never the middle.
Yeah, I suppose. Well, and this is the kind of thing that I noticed with that is like there's a bit of like almost like a pendulum effect where sometimes people will really lean in one direction, like maybe a ton of avoidance. And then all at once it swings in the other direction, and sometimes in some unhealthy ways. Like, I'm going to be super transparent and I'm going to tell you everything. And then it all explodes. And then they go back to some avoidance. And it's a really interesting phenomenon that I see with those kind of things. But anyways, like this was very much an instance of there was needed some hard conversations that were being held back, and it was really good to see that win for Stu, that it didn't turn out as badly as he had hoped. And
it's what we tend to expect when you know what to say, when you know what you're gonna text, you know what you're gonna say. It's just way easier. Most of you guys are you're dealing with an extreme case, right? And you're trying to figure out on your own what to say, what to do. It's hard. If it's an easy case, an intermediate case, sure, you can work it out. But if you are all kind of people, you are in an extreme case. There are affairs, there is anxiety, there is depression, maybe PTSD. Maybe there is a horrible story. Your spouse thinks you're horrible or worse than you are. Maybe there is little communication. If you're in an extreme case, we put the example of you're being effectively drafted to like play in the NBA, right? Or like imagine you're drafted to be like in the Marine Corps or in the Navy SEALs or something all of a sudden, right? You're being put with the best of the best, with like the very top, in this case, in a very top extreme case. You are not qualified yet to neither assess how much hope there is, nor to look at the actions of your spouse and tell whether they mean anything, because they usually don't.
Yeah, I'm reminded a little bit of a conversation that I had with a prospective client. So occasionally I'll jump into some of these calls, and I found it really interesting. This guy here, he presented a case where he himself had a lot of doubts about his marriage, and he kept bringing up these doubts, and his wife kept wanting to work things through, and eventually she kind of got fed up with a lot of his doubts and was starting to pull away. And it was really interesting in this conversation that, on the one hand, he was expressing to me he wasn't sure if he could find any amount of love in his marriage. And then when I asked him a little bit later, it's like, how hopeful do you think that there's a solution around this? He actually listed some high number, like 7 or 8. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. You're telling me on the one hand, you don't think that you can have any good, deep, fulfilling love in your marriage, but then you're telling me, hey, there's probably solutions to there. And I was talking to him about this. I was like, what's going on there? And he just, quite frankly, I don't think he knew what to say. As in, like, that's a really confusing situation. Like, I recognize myself, like, it's, as you were saying, Sergio, it's hard to evaluate how much hope or how much ability to fix things there are when you're in the middle of it all. So, like,
Exactly.
even himself, he was on both ends of the spectrum almost, it seemed like, at different points.
Exactly. People don't understand that this is a job. Like, it's what we do, right? We work not with easy cases, but with extreme cases. And you, Marc, are in the battlefield every day. Imagine what you guys listening to this are going through. Marc is going through 5, 6, 7 times a day with every call. The pain you are in, the mercy.
I'll tell you, like, sometimes at the end of the day, I just sit there and I'm like, whew, that was some intense stuff going on there that day. I mean, I'm able to handle it. Like, I'm used to this. I've been doing this kind of thing for now, a good 15 years. And
exactly.
like, honestly, sometimes the stuff that you guys are bringing up, that it's hard to deal with. I'm not just talking about myself. I'm like, you guys are dealing with some tough stuff.
Exactly, emotionally, right? But at the end of the day, the answers are there. It's always usually the same pattern. We are not surprised when we find out that your spouse had alcohol issues, or your spouse had some anxiety, some depression, some external factor. We're not surprised by that most of the time because we're guessing those things. We're guessing most of the things because we see it every day.
Oh, there's definitely, like, very clear patterns. Like, I can almost hear it, as an example, when I'm seeing some behavior in a spouse and it's really not making sense and they seem to be overreacting. I'm like, oh, I know exactly what this pattern means. And I asked, hey, has your spouse had any trauma around these sort of things? And they're like, yeah, it's this, and this. I was like, exactly. I know what these patterns mean. It's just, it's just an everyday.
It's fixable.
Oh yeah.
But that's the thing. What's fixable for a doctor, it's not fixable for the patient. People really need to become humble enough to realize that it's an extreme case. And people are usually humble enough when we are in conferences, in webinars, in workshops. People recognize they don't know what they're doing, but they don't really go to the next step, which is they don't know how to calculate hope. And most of you are feeling hopeless when you should not. When maybe it's easier than you think it is. You simply don't know the solution yet, right? I wanted to bring up for today's podcast one of the people I was talking to earlier on today for this next cohort of the 6-month program. And in this example, this guy is a great guy. And he was saying how recently his spouse, and I want to see what you think, Marc, because you might have seen the notes, but I want to see what you think.
Mm-hmm.
His spouse was, had an affair some years ago. And the other week, he found her texting on her phone, right? So again, everything seemed a little bit fine, but he asked, look, who are you talking to? Which again, it's one of the mistakes, right? If your spouse had an affair, you guys are still struggling. No matter how decent things look, the problem is not fixed. You might stop the affair, but you haven't fixed the root issue, right? So that's for some of you guys listening to this that are feeling like things are going well. things might be going well now, but the root issue is not fixed. It's what we call up cycles and down cycles, right? You're in an up cycle, you feel like everything is fine. You're in a down cycle, you feel like it's the end of the world. It's neither. There is a root cause causing symptoms. The symptoms come and go. They mean nothing. Anyways.
Yeah. But there's an affair, right? Yeah.
Exactly. There was an affair. It was stopped by now. So he sees her texting. She's like, hey, who is it? She's like, I don't want to tell you. So, of course, the most logical conclusion is oh, she's having another affair. So he does the unthinkable, and he actually pulls out the phone from her hands, right? Again, bad move. I told him on the call. He knows. Everyone knows. The move doesn't matter here. It's why that move happened, right? So he pulled out the phone. He saw the conversation, and things escalated. Even the police came in, things like that, right? He didn't get physical, of course. He didn't get physical, but I think like other family members saw the interaction and they got concerned. I don't know exactly what happened there, right?
Yeah.
The point is, why did he act that way? Especially when later on, there is a twist to this story. Later on, she revealed that she wasn't talking to a guy. She showed him the conversation and she was talking to another woman who needed help, and she was helping her, right? Okay. What happened? Well, there are two questions in my head, right, Mark? A, why didn't she just tell him? And B, why did he react in that way? And the answers are very simple. A, she didn't tell him because there is a problem. It doesn't matter how nice things look. It's an upcycle. The root problem is not fixed. She was likely doing what we call a resistance test. She's effectively giving you trouble for no reason to see how you react. And again, it's not that they're thinking about this as a test. It's that they're just, without necessarily consciously trying to give you the test, they're putting you on through this test, right? To see if you care about them, to see if you've changed, to see how you will react. It's a bit of a test that she's putting you through, right? That's why she's doing that. Not because there is no hope, not because there is bad communication, it's because she's putting you through a test. And then the question is, it was an easy test to pass. You didn't need to do that much. In fact, if you do nothing, you pass the test.
Well, in that case.
Why did he fail the test, right? What do you think made him, Mark, want to pull out the phone from your hand? When it's a case that there is a lot of hope, I see a lot of hope based on the assessment. He said he was a 4 or a 5 on the call, right? So he didn't see the same hope. Why do you think he reacted that way, Mark?
Well, that's really interesting. I think it's connected to a little bit to what you were saying earlier, is that in a lot of these cases, the problem isn't resolved. Like for him, maybe the affair was in the past, but does he feel safe in the relationship? And he, even further, like here is this threat to him. Like he wants to feel assurance. He's saying, I would like to know who's on the phone. And he's, underneath all that, he's like, I want to feel some assurance here. I want to feel like there's some openness. And she said no.
It's a bit of husband mode, what we talk about too.
Well, to me, husband mode isn't necessarily terrible if things are going well. And like, if everything's going fine, it's fine for him to wonder who's on the phone. And if everything's going fine, like I can go to my wife and I can ask her, hey, who are you talking to? Largely because, for my wife and I, we see each other as a spouse. Like we want to have that connection. And I do, your point here in bringing up like this husband mode is, yes, a lot of those actions where you kind of assume that acting as a husband or acting as a wife is okay
when she doesn't really fully see you as such.
Exactly.
Because she doesn't fully see you as such.
Yeah, that does turn into a problem here. And as a husband, it might be okay to ask this, but if she wasn't seeing him in that role, then it's inappropriate for him to be grabbing the phone and checking in on who she's calling.
Exactly, right? So basically, he had the expectation that she should reply. She should tell him, right? But she was testing him, right? And he was in husband mode, aka I feel entitled to that information, rather than in maybe engaged couple mode or dating mode a little bit more in a jokingly manner, in which you assume that she's checked out regardless of what she says or does. She's going through something, rather than acting as her husband, and she doesn't see you as such. So no matter how many flowers you bring, no matter how, it's not going to have an impact, right? It's not about being a good husband anymore. That was years before. Now it's about how do you get her back, right? You have to go back to what we call dating mode a little bit more. And it's about changing her story and getting her to see you as a new person. She's put you into this box. We're talking about this box concept. She kind of put you into this box that, hey, you're manipulative, you're always angry. That was his case. She felt like he was always hungry, right?
Yeah.
You are this horrible person, you cheated on me, whatever, right? And anything you do is seen through that lens. Anything you do is put back into that box, right? So you need to break down that box and get her to see you as a new person, get her to see you that you've changed. And also what you, Marc, call bring up the mirror, right? Show her that, hey, dude, she messed up too. She also made mistakes, right?
Well, I think there's like with holding up the mirror or, like as you try to increase some accountability, there's some timing with that even as well. It's a really difficult thing. Just like, you're talking about going into husband mode, there's like a time and a place for that sort of behavior. And similarly, there's a time and a place for challenging some story and for holding someone else accountable and like really exploring those discrepancies between, in this case, her having had an affair and then her, having some secrecy around some calls. Like, it's hard to confront that when things aren't good. What I notice a lot with that is like a lot of people stumble over those sort of behaviors. Like for him, it makes perfect sense to confront that. Like, hey, you're hiding something from me. You are required to share with me this information. And it all fell apart. A large part of that, I imagine, is because he hadn't worked up to a point where he could discuss some of those hard topics or where he could challenge her on some of those things. He didn't do those first steps. And so it all kind of broke down.
Yeah. Exactly. That's interesting stuff.
Yeah. So what did I'm curious, like where that went. Like, did he recognize that wasn't going to go anywhere? Well, like, did he recognize the mistake there?
Of course, right? We all see it. Like, hindsight is 2020, right? But the reality here is that most of the time we are not qualified to, give us ourselves advice because we're in the bottle and you cannot read the label from the outside, right? Mm-hmm. What are some other interesting cases you've seen? What is like and again, people don't really realize that everything we do, everything that you, Marc, have developed, right, over the years, it's a system. People don't realize that we have spreadsheets, we have diagrams, we track things, we use numbers, we use scripts, we do things word by word. Why is it so surgical? Why is it so measured? Because it is an extreme case. It's not enough to go the improve yourself route, like some other people recommend out there, or the be a better husband, change yourself and she will come back. Focus on yourself. No, you focus on yourself. She's an emotional alcoholic. You will not pay enough attention to her. And then she will continue drinking on her emotional alcoholic story, right?
Yeah, you
need a surgical procedure.
Yeah, some interesting cases. And we're talking about like this is in terms of like a very specific process. And what I find interesting is when I have clients that come to me and they're like, well, my case it's different. And, my case is going to be more difficult. And I'm just like, no, that's just not the case. A somewhat recent client of ours, I actually have a few in this sort of scenario, but like there's a case of a bit of like, and I don't want to put any official diagnosis on stuff like this, but a case of a bit of what I would call some codependency. And what's interesting here is like with my client, his wife is at the same time saying, hey, I want a lot of space. And at the same time, gets really like, one day, like say she wants a lot of space. And then the next day she's like, I can't live without you. And this is really hard. And why aren't you drawing boundaries? Why are you making this so hard for me to pull away from you? And he's like, what is going on there? Where she's doesn't want anything to do with me. And then the next day she's like, she can't live without me. And then it's my fault that she feels this way. And he was like, I bet essentially he was asking me, I bet you've never like seen something like this. Is there any real hope for stuff like this? Is too confusing. I was like, no, dude, like this is just another day me. I've seen stuff like this before. Like I said, even right now I have a few clients that have some codependent sort of issues going on. And, with all of these cases, whether there's some codependency or whether it's an extreme amount of distance, whether there's a lot of fights or anything, I've found that as we approach this with a process, and as we approach this really being thoughtful about how we're going about these interactions, it all kind of follows a very similar path. And in this case, and just like all cases, we're needing to take a little bit of time to really take a moment to figure out what is your goal here? Like, what kind of messages, what kind of actions are you trying to build up? We talk a lot with the clients about their counter narrative, or sometimes we call it like the home messages. And for this guy here, it was a lot about wanting there to be some healthy space and wanting there to be some healthy independence between the two of them, wanting for them each to take responsibility for their own actions. And I was like, okay, that's not as common of a home message or counter narrative, but it was really important for him. And as we started to develop that, what was really interesting is his wife started being a little bit less frantic, and she started opening up a little bit more. And there wasn't quite so much drama as he was sticking to his counter narrative that we were building up. So like, even this, what he considered was an extreme and different and unique case, it all kind of followed the same flow that we were doing with a lot of the other clients, and he started seeing a lot of progress there. So this isn't we're talking about this being like a surgical sort of situation, and that really is the case. Like, when we actually go in and we're careful about how we're handling this, and when we are very thoughtful about how we're proceeding, a lot of the panic and a lot of the desperation drop away, and we're much better able to move forward, even though things seem a bit hopeless.
Exactly. So that's very interesting. There are many cases like that. Again, it's not just codependency. It's like anything you can imagine. We've seen people with bipolar disorder, depression, anxiety. An extreme case is different from what the average coach out there that works on relationships helps out. They're offering you videos. They're offering you sessions. It's just not enough.
I have some friends, so I've been in this game for a little while, and I have friends, I call them friends. They're people that I've met with on many occasions, and we talk about business, and we're friendly towards each other. I've never met any of these people in real life, but they're people who I have a relationship with, that are peers, that are in similar coaching sort of, they run their own coaching programs. And what I've found funny about a lot of this is, a lot of them eventually shift their practice because they don't like dealing with these extreme cases. They really don't.
Can't. Because then you don't get results. And then what do you tell the client? It's hard. They usually just say, look, there was no hope, or focus on working on yourself.
Well, I hear a lot from them. They're like, I need to shift my practice. And they're like, I just want to work with, like, they'll tell me, I just want to work with high ticket clients who are like already winning, because that feels really in alignment with my energy. Or they'll use some sort of other woo-woo sort of.
And it's like, of course, I want people who pay me a ton of money that are in an easy case. And it's like,
oh yeah. And that's exactly it. They're searching. They're like, I just want people to pay me money, and it's easy, and I'll help them get from like a 95% to a 97%, in terms of like health or something like that. And
I want to make them great husband. Here's the thing. I know some of you guys are looking at different programs, different people, right? We don't particularly care about you trusting us or what we say. That's why we do the workshops. That's why we show you literally the spreadsheets we use, the process we use, right? The tools, actually how to. We're doing a workshop tomorrow if you guys are listening to this, so keep an eye on your email for that. I'm running a workshop tomorrow. It's going to be pretty massive. In any case, you guys are looking at different people for this. My job is not to tell you to trust us, but to help you determine who is talking bullshit and who is not necessarily. And anybody who is talking more about, oh, how painful is this for you? Oh, what are your goals? Why is this important to you? Oh, how do you feel about this? Anybody who's trying to prop up how bad you feel, how good it's going to feel to get the problem, is trying to sell you on something. Challenge that. You need to be getting told things you didn't know before. When I get people who want to join our program, before I explain to them how the program works, I say, look, what do you think we're going to do with you? And they say, well, first, I don't know. Maybe you're going to help me open up communication, right? And I'm like, okay, what do you think we're going to tell you? Well, you're going to tell me to listen to her, right? You're going to tell me to be patient. You're going to tell me to, not get angry. And I'm like, okay, so do you need to pay somebody this much to tell you those things? It's like, no, exactly, right? You should not be really listening to any advice that is conventional, because you are dealing with an extreme case. Conventional advice, A, it's not worth paying for. B, it's not applicable to you, no matter how many testimonials they have, because testimonials are cherry picked. You get 200 people in the program, you get 50 testimonials. That's a success rate for some people, right? No, don't look at those things. Don't look at testimonials. Don't look at those things. Can be biased. Look at, do they have a process? Does the process make sense in your head? And does the process sound traditional, or is there an actual breakthrough? Are they trying to just sell you something, or are they trying to get you to understand what the real problem is? And for us, that is the emotional alcoholic analogy. That is the big breakthrough for some people, that we tell them, look, what your spouse says, what your spouse does means nothing. She's effectively an emotional alcoholic. She's built up this story about her, about the situation, and that is driving her behavior. We don't look at what she says or does. Anyways, so it's a very interesting story you brought up.
I do, and I will say, I think it's a good thought to have. It's a good breakthrough. I think a lot of people certainly, they look at what their spouse is saying, and they're like, well, if she's saying it's over, then it's over. And I think a lot of people appreciate that. You and I, we don't care about that quite so much. I mean, we have to take it into consideration. There's so much more.
No, we don't. We do. You have to. Here's the thing. You as the coach have to take it into consideration, because you know what it means, and sure, you know how to take many things. The client should not be taken into consideration, especially
that's more accurate. I would agree with that.
Right? Because you're always trying to explain your thought process, because to you, your thought process is very nuanced. You know the full system. You know all the steps, the stages. You know all the tools, right? To you, yes, it's just formation. To the client, to the situation, A, it's not how we calculate hope. We don't look at what she says or does, because that's not the real problem. That is the symptom. B, the client should not be looking at those things to make decisions, right? That is the real point here.
I would agree with that. I always love to take things from a more nuanced position, but that's part of how I like to talk to people, and that's part of the job, right?
Exactly. And I'm seeing here the comments on Facebook. We see like Robert Smith saying here in the live video, saying, hey, this sounds similar. And I'm like, yeah, most people's situations are actually more similar than you guys think. In fact, especially amongst extreme cases, right?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's what I wanted to bring up a little bit for today. Anything interesting that you want to bring up too, Marc?
I think we covered a lot of like what we were aiming to discuss today. We're talking a lot about hope and how we take a look at that quite a bit. We took a look at a lot of the examples. Certainly I would love to hear any comments from people. And this is, I always want to invite this from anyone that's listening in, or anyone that just wants some questions answered. We try to be really respondent to our audience, to the community. That's why we have the Facebook groups, and that's why we try to be a little bit active in there. So I would love to hear from anyone out there that's listening, or even if you're in a bit of a listening to the replay of this, please tell us like what you'd like to hear from these sort of conversations. We're aiming to make this a little bit more free flowing, and we want to make sure that it's serving you all. Not just as a way for you to get to know, say, myself and Sergio or the other people within our organization, but I'm hoping that this is an actual good, useful sort of tool that you're actually learning something a little bit as you listen to these conversations. Anyways, that's my 2 cents. I don't know. What about you? Any last thoughts here?
No, that's pretty good stuff. We're gonna see what's going on there. We have quite a few more topics I want to talk about, so I'm gonna give you guys some ideas. we have the idea of the green box, orange box. So it's the idea that we see the process of recovery, like 3, 4, 5, 6 different kind of boxes, right? Like one of the boxes is communication. Another one is what you say. Another one is the hope you see, right? And most people have like one in green, but all of the others in red, right? So the process cannot flow. We have the idea of hope protection and what we think on, how some people try to protect themselves by saying, look, I'm going to be moderate with my hope so that I don't get my heart broken. That's wrong. When you're moderate with your hope, you're not seeing the real hope there is, and you're going to act more hopeless. And when you act more hopeless, you're more needy. Or when you're being put to the test, like in the example of this guy with the phone earlier on, if he wasn't a 5 and he was a 10, if he knew, even though anybody telling you that there is 100% hope, it's bullshitting you, right? But if he fully was believing that there was 100% hope, that he was going to recover it because he knew what to say, what to do, right? If he had more hope, he would not have done that. He didn't do that because he had anger issues. He did that because he didn't see the hope we do. So again, even though there is never 100% hope, usually there is 90% hope. There is 85% hope. If you do what you're told, things are going to work out way better than you think they can. So anyways, don't really try to protect your hope. Those are some of the minor points. We can cover more some of the day.
Yeah, absolutely.
And also maybe like how to change the story. We get lots of questions about changing the story, which is kind of tricky to talk about.
Yeah, so one last reminder, like you said, you're running a workshop tomorrow, so please people show up for that. I think you're going a little bit into a little bit more detail about how some of the processes work in Sergio. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. If you guys are in the Facebook group or you guys are in our emails, just check your email. You see an invitation. Just take a look to register for that. But yeah, it's going to be pretty cool. So yeah, let us know in the comments. Let's see how that goes. And I will see you guys in the next week then. Cool stuff.
Sounds good. See you, Sergio.
Thanks for listening to The Thriving Marriage, your A to Z blueprint for not just surviving marriage, but thriving. Until next time, my friends, thrive on.